perhaps you're spying on me again, and perhaps in spying on me, you're looking at my my first effort at a legal filing. And in there, I asked for assistance in several matters. And one of the primary things I said is that I'd had evidence stolen regarding competitive bidding on a project connected to a weapons company that involved, if nothing else, youth that were attending a robotics conference in 3 cities, including Houston at the time. But you got to understand that competitive bidding was not just about on the youth at the robotics conference. As a matter of fact, for over a year, I watched not only how actual young people were used in different situations as part of the bidding, but that simulations were set up where adults were supposed to be put in positions of having some sort of relationship with minors that was inappropriate. For instance, as I reported to the Texas State Auditor about the back to school event, and then all of these people who were on the streets and had specific things that would have put them into a particular system through the state, being put in situations where they were pretending to be kids at school. It's just one example. And for instance, the different social service providers, including the religious based ones, and the way they would infantilize adults and put them in situations where they were proxied as kids. And then the specific manners in which children would engage with and among adults, including in provision of services and or including when it came to distributions of food or resources to the homeless, and these sorts of situations those young people were allowed to be put in, and what was going on electronically concurrent to what those young people were doing. And these were some of the things that I was horrified by what I was seeing. And the undercurrent was this understanding that in Texas, at least some parts of Texas, there's this systematology that says that your kid is your bond. And what it is it's almost a sort of pseudo extortion scheme. You take people and you bond your kid to them, and they are supposed to give things to your kid, including intangible property. And they're supposed to understand that. And in exchange, part of what you get is you get the feelings of being resonant with the child, which includes harvesting their hormones. And with the electronic currencies and the fintech associated with the electronic currencies that have been going on, I contend that's one of the direct causal factors involved in what was reported as alarming increases of sexual abuse between children at mental health providers in the state of Texas during the years of 2017 2018. That the fintech in the background, as well as the alleged homeland security features, were involved with so much sexualized imagery and so much sexualized functionality that as it is coursing in the backgrounds of all the other economic processes these children are involved in, including those that would be identified or mischaracterized as telemedication, that the children were coming to consciousness of this sexualization that was going on in their background, and they were acting it out with other children. They weren't hallucinating, they weren't engaged in some sort of psychosis. There's literally that much pornography in the background. And the children, some of the younger, more precocious children, will act out on what's going on. And rather than addressing the electronic sexual exploitation, and rather than addressing the addiction to pornography that is being cultivated under the mischaracterization of it being some form of electronic medication or telemedication or some other kind of gratification that people are supposed to get through engaging the digital media and the electronic realm, that they just let the porn go and they just accept when people engage in sexualized scenarios, and they have been conditioned in this society to this hypersexualization, including in connection with their sexual activity in their own home. But Concurrent to that is the business operations associated with those processes, including in your own home and including if you have a small business. Or rather, somebody decides to use you and your life as part of an incorporation effort. You know the difference between capitalized words and all caps? It's a subtle difference, but it also makes a very big difference if you understand the potential implications. Where are we in the Governor's Commission regarding biotechnology, biomedicine, bioengineering, and nanotechnology? My understanding is that it was set up to be implemented by 2005. And by the beginning of 2005, that commission had replaced the Texas Business Code concerning small business operations for at least a period of time wherein the actual Texas Vernon Legal Code for 2005 had the primary introductory information for the small business code in the state of Texas replaced by the invocation of that commission. The commission was started under Rick Perry when he was governor. Now you can still find it, information about it in the Texas Government Code, but it doesn't discuss how it was originally connected to small business operations. Why am I saying that? Because right now, presumably, the nation of Italy is involved in a massive prosecution of organized crime. There's 350 people that are being prosecuted for their relationship to organized crime. You know, in the United States, we have a specific fixation on what we identify as organized crime and the kinds of communities that certain terms like racketeering or organized crime are allowed to be associated with. Disproportionate to the actual occurrences is the sort of racialized typecasting that goes into that. Is somebody trying to effectuate some kind of racial equity when it comes to cooperation with organized crime, including organized crime that might use legitimate or so called legitimate fronts in order to engage in large scale narcotics trafficking? Narcotics trafficking that might also accommodate human smuggling and or weapons trafficking, because when they were doing the bidding for the TX trainer, one of the things that kept happening is case law that the state of Texas had already engaged regarding Boeing Inc. kept getting swapped out, or matched rather, with case law concerning ISDs and alleged whistleblower reports. That there was specific, demonstrable, almost programmatic processes whereby people attempting to get public resources were put through scenarios that were coded to, what was it, government public information, where the options were actually a part of a system of automation that was based upon engaging with the civil service sector that directly correlated with those particular cases, specifically the pairing and the volleying off of each other of cases involving the now governor but former attorney general and Boeing, and cases involving ISDs where allegedly they were addressing matters connected to whistleblower reports. But what ends up happening is that over the last 3 years, Texas has increasingly confidentialized the information and narrowed the redress associated with attempting to engage a whistleblower claim so that it can be recirculated through the state into various public pension and retirement system accounts. This is what I've been tracking. And in the meantime, how many of those are connected to healthcare? How many of those are connected to alleged healthcare and are really in some process of acquiring research and development for the Texas defense sector, including the manners in which the defense sector is involved with both the gas and oil sector, but also the medical sector. See, there's this report I saw that discussed these two Italian doctors that issued this report discussing how they had been doing some examinations of some immunizations that were available in Italy throughout 2017 and even a little earlier. And they had identified in the actual vaccine that there were nanoparticles that were otherwise unidentified. And what were they? There were these things in there that weren't a part of the vaccine. Now, at the time, my understanding is that the nation of Italy, the actual health ministry of Italy, for a period of time, supported and actually had a public announcement about their concern that the Italian childhood immunization program was problematic. But this was around the time that an Italian defense company was also involved in the competitive bidding on the TX trainer contract. They did not drop out until some time later. During the time frame when these Italian doctors were doing that research and when the Italian ministry was actually putting into the public realm in Italy, there were street protests all over Italy protesting against the immunization policy. Around the time, an Italian company and at least two American companies, there were other companies at one point in time, there were three companies, one of which was an Italian company, bidding on the TX trainer program. Now, what exactly this trainer program is questionable. But then at some point, presumably, there's computers and their research were seized. In the beginning of 2018, it was reported that there were computers and their research was seized. And since then, well, there was an election. And a new government came in, and all of a sudden, all of that information, including through the health ministry, about the immunizations program, well, I mean, where can you find that information now? I'll tell you what you do find now, and this is very alarming. At the beginning of the COVID-19 outbreak, the major report said that Italy had been disproportionately impacted, that percentage-wise and aggregation-wise, that deaths and cases of infection of COVID-19 were disproportionate in Italy, that Italy was hit particularly hard. This was a phenomena during March, April, May, even June of last year, and that there was a specific and significant percentage of children. Well, now, for the last 2 months, since we've had the new administration in, the information about COVID-19, specifically what was going on at the beginning of COVID-19 in Italy, is missing. Oh, it's no big deal. They've only had it's completely different now than it was. So one of two things happen. Either at the beginning of the COVID-19 outbreak, there was misrepresentation in the media about a disproportionate impact on Italy, including children, or they're attempting to backdate the stock as if lots of children died. Lots of people died, and they made stock out of the people who died. But when they swap the stock or trade the stock or sell the stock, well, they don't want it to be underwritten with all that death and calamity. So the public information, while it's being traded, reflects differently than it did at the time. Is that what happened? Is that literally what happened and what's happening now? Are they misreporting the numbers because they're actually liquidating human capital and redistributing it? And so in the processes of redistribution, they want to have a different characterization than what is actually factually correct? Is that what's happening? And if that's what's happening, Was there a specific process whereby it was beta tested in Italy? So there was a disproportionate impact on the outbreak in Italy, and now they're trying to recirculate that, which then brings up the question of this organized crime trial in Italy. Are they actually trying members of organized crime in Italy as part of some sort of bust of crime within Italy? Or are they offsetting some other kind of losses as a form of leverage? I'm certainly hoping that it's not that the Italian government has cowed to allowing itself to be put in a position where it has to provide political risk insurance for organized crime elements around the world that agreed to conspire to strategically murder people in order to fill racial or ethnic quotas, so that then that demographic information along with the actual genetic materials could be redistributed. Is that what's happening? Because I'm pretty certain that that's literally what's happening. And in the course of that, it was already understood that there were certain things that had to have happened by now, or there was going to be a transfer again. There was already a transfer last summer. We've been dealing with transfers now. But if we don't be honest about what's actually happening, then we are allowing for the compounding of what is the inevitable consequences. So, where are we in Texas? And I'm sorry, where's the rest of the damn country in demanding an exposure of what is that gubernatorial commission? What was Greg Abbott doing in Israel discussing small business development in energy right before there was a major international conference around the Holocaust in Israel, as Abbott was on his way to Switzerland right before the Davos convention? Because if you think and if you understand it from a perspective of Greg Abbott being in charge of a commission connected to the component parts of biological and chemical weapons, making a strategic deal in Israel before going to Switzerland, right before the announcement of a global pandemic, don't you think there's a very significant burden of proof on the governor of Texas and the Senate of Texas specifically? And don't you think that other people in the United States owe it to the rest of the world when it comes to the safety and health safety of people, including children, to expose whatever it is that's been allowed to proliferate in the darkness this long? Where is the information about what has been happening with that gubernatorial commission for the last 15 years? This isn't a time to say, well, we're in a pandemic. We need to not disclose. You mean like not disclose like you didn't about basil? You mean like not disclose like you started setting up and staggering over the course of several years, beginning in September of 2019 when you changed the pension code? I don't think that's acceptable at all. That is not acceptable at all. This is not a time for seizing information and then allowing people to copyright and patent it for their own proprietary gain. If there is a situation whereas as either part of the Paris Accords or some other alleged global health security sector, people agreed to put up a certain amount or percentage of their national stock to be liquidated for redistribution, then it behooved the leadership of our countries to let us know. You can't make a secret pact to selectively and strategically murder certain people in your own country so you can fill a fucking quota. And then expect that, what? You're going to pay off a couple of us to keep quiet and to brand the cattle that's going to be slaughtered for you to get your little futures set up? I don't think so. Where's the information about the gubernatorial commission from Texas regarding specifically nanotechnology? And where's the information about what happened in Italy? Was the information presented at the beginning of the COVID-19 outbreak mischaracterized in order to inflate the numbers and to misrepresent the intensity of the outbreak in Italy? Or are they lying now and overwriting information now to cover up for what actually happened? And if that's the case, are they trying to broker an arrangement to credit deaths already occurred instead of allowing for more deaths to occur with specific kinds of demographics that might be considered compatible, and or allow for that to be used as credit to pay for what would be otherwise considered to be due as part of some kind of racial equity or reparations or redistribution? These are actual questions. These are actual considerations. If you are somebody and you identify as a particular racial group and think you personally are going to be selected out of whatever the harvest is supposed to be from your group, you're wrong. You're wrong.